We've all been there. January 1st rolls around and we suddenly decide it's time to overhaul our lives. We hit the gym every day, swear off sugar, and commit to an exhausting routine. And by January 15th, we're right back on the couch. We fail because we assume that massive success requires massive action. But what if permanent transformation doesn't require any huge leaps at all? That is the core premise of James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. Today, we're looking closely at the lessons from the first chapter. Clear argues that we should focus on atomic habits. These are tiny, everyday routines that are easy to do. We're talking about aiming for a 1% improvement each day, rather than trying to redesign your entire life overnight. Relying on a sudden burst of motivation to carry you through a huge change usually leads to burnout. Sustainable progress comes from repeating small, nearly invisible actions that build on each other over time. Clear puts it this way: habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. This graph shows how that math works out in practice. If you manage to get exactly 1% better every single day for 1 year, those small gains compound. By the end of the year, you end up 37 times better than when you started. But the math also works in reverse. If you get 1% worse each day for a year, replicating poor decisions and tiny mistakes, your baseline declines nearly all the way down to zero. The tricky part is the illusion of the early days. If we zoom in on day 1 or day 2, the gap between the positive trajectory and the negative one is mathematically too small to notice. You save a little money, but you aren't rich. You eat a salad, but your weight hasn't changed. Because a good habit or a bad habit seems to make zero difference on any given Tuesday, we easily dismiss them. But when you track that 1% difference over months and years, the accumulated impact is staggering. This brings up a frustrating question. If making a 1% change is mathematically so easy, why do most people give up after a few weeks? To understand why, imagine an ice cube sitting on a table in a very cold room. The room is 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and it slowly starts to heat up. 26 degrees, 27, 28. The room is getting warmer, and energy is being added to the environment, but the ice cube remains completely solid. Then the temperature shifts just 1 more degree, hitting 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The ice immediately begins to melt. That single tiny shift was no larger than any of the previous ones, but it triggered a massive visible change. This chart illustrates what Clear calls the plateau of latent potential. When you start a new habit, your early efforts aren't wasted. They are simply being stored up. You are building the potential required to cross a critical threshold. So if you find yourself working hard but not seeing immediate results, your habits aren't failing. You just haven't crossed your own melting point yet. The invisible potential is still accumulating. To survive that plateau and cross your melting point, abandon a very common piece of advice. You need to forget about setting goals and focus strictly on building systems. A goal is simply the final destination. It is the outcome you want to achieve, like running a marathon or writing a book. A system is the daily process. It's the specific, repeating habits you do every day that inch you closer to that destination. If goals were the secret to success, everyone would succeed. In any sport, both teams step onto the field with the exact same goal. They both want to win the championship. The goal doesn't determine who takes home the trophy. Goals are useful for setting a direction. You need to know where you are headed. But systems are the actual mechanisms that allow you to make progress. Let's apply this to a relatable scenario, like trying to get in shape. The goal might be lose 20 pounds. That abstract outcome is helpful to know, but it doesn't tell you what to do on a Tuesday morning. The system, however, is highly actionable. Walk for 20 minutes before work and pack a healthy lunch. This leads to the most important rule of the chapter. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. We've covered a lot of ground today. We saw how tiny 1% improvements compound exponentially over time. We learned from the ice cube that patience is required to survive the plateau of latent potential. And we learned that robust daily systems matter far more than ambitious goals. Think about a system you can start building today and drop it in the comments below. Next time, we'll dive into Chapter 2 and explore how these small habits actually shape your identity. Achieving a fulfilling life
isn't about making a single massive leap. It comes down to committing to an endless cycle of tiny, sustainable refinements.